Hello, class. Today we're looking at Chapter 1, Lesson 6, Adding and Subtracting Rational Numbers. So this sounds pretty simple, right? We've been adding and subtracting for years. However, now we're going to take into account negative numbers. An example of how you might use this in real life would be like temperatures. There could be a day that a temperature was 3 degrees Celsius, and the next day it's negative 30 degrees Celsius, and you want to find out what the change was. Well, because one's a positive and one's a negative, you have to take that into consideration. And always think about it being the distance between that number and 0. So it's absolute value. You're adding together the absolute value of each of those numbers. So let's use an example here. We're going to use a number line, and we're looking at finding the distance between negative 4 and 2.8. I'm sorry, negative 1.4 and 2.8. So go ahead and fill in your number line. And once you have that filled in, let's go ahead and put these numbers on the number line. So negative 1.4. So you can kind of estimate here. I did it so each of these lines between the lines were worth 2. So therefore this should be negative 1.4 right here. And then 2.8. So 2.8 is going to be right here, and that's a positive. So if we want to find the distance between them, we want to see how far 2.8 is from 0. Well, that 2.8 from 0 is 2.8. How far is negative 1.4 from 0? It's 1.4. And if we add those two together, we're going to get 4.2. So the difference between those two numbers is 4.2, looking at the absolute value. If you see it written, it would be that you had 2.8, and we're going to try to find the difference, subtract negative 1.4. Well, I think of the negative if you have a subtraction sign and a negative sign. When they are put together like that, they attract each other and turn into a plus sign. So if you think of it like that, it gets the same answer. Whichever way is going to help you to be able to understand how you are subtracting negatives. If you want to check your work, we could say, so this, from this point to 1 is 0.4. And then we have 1, 2, 3. And then from here to here is 0.8. And if we add all of those together, we get 4.2. Same answer. So now let's look at adding rational numbers. If the two numbers are both positive, they're going to equal a positive. So I'm just going to go positive plus a positive equals a positive. And same sign also, if it's a negative plus a negative, it's going to equal a negative. But then looking at different signs. So when you look at different signs, the absolute value, which is how far it is from 0, of each addend, subtract the lesser from the greater. The sum has the sign of the addend with that greater absolute value. So you're going to look at the two numbers and try to decide which one is a bigger number. If it's the negative that's a bigger number, then it's going to be a negative. If it's the positive that's a bigger number, it's going to equal a positive. Let's put that into words. Okay, so if we look at this number 1, 1 3/4 plus negative 2 1/8. So comparing 1 3/4, the absolute value of 1 3/4 is 1 3/4. That's how far it is from 0. And the absolute value of negative 2 1/8 is 2 1/8 from 0. So looking at those two numbers, this is the bigger number. So therefore, it's going to equal a negative because it's the bigger number. So then what we want to do is we need to be able to actually subtract the two. So to do that, we need to make sure that they have the same denominator. So this one has a 4, this one has an 8. 4 goes into 8 2 times. So if we multiply that number, this number by 2, we have to do it to the top. So then this is going to equal 1. 2 times 3 is 6. 4 times 2 is 8. And then it is going to be adding a negative, so it's the same as subtracting 2 1/8. So it'd be easier to think that this is the negative 2 1/8 over 1 6/8. Okay, so we can't subtract 1 from 6, so we're going to have to borrow 1 from here. And so then that turns into a whole 8 over 8. When we add that to the 1/8, we get 9. So then 9, if we take 6 away from 9, we get 3/8. 1 subtract 1 is 0, and we know it's going to be a negative. So our answer is a negative 3/8. If you want to think about it on a number line, you can draw a number line. So here's my number line. And we are going to be at 1 3/4. So here is 1, this one is 2. So here is 3/4 or 1 6/8. So this is where we're starting. And we are going to subtract 2 1/8. So if we go and subtract just 1/8, it's going to be here. So then we're going to subtract 2 from it. So that's going to be 2 whole. So it's going to be 16 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Here's 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Here's 2. This is line 1, 2, 3 out of 8. Negative. Same answer. Okay, so looking at number 2, we have negative 3.5 plus 4.25. So when we look at these two numbers, not thinking about where they are as far as what one's bigger, but just their absolute value from 0, 4.25 is a bigger number than 3.5. Therefore, we know that this is going to equal a positive answer because 4.25 is positive. So basically, we are taking 3.5 away from 4.25. So we could write that like this. 4.25 subtract 3.5. It's going to equal 5. Borrow 1 over here. 7.75. So it's going to equal a positive 0.75. If we want to think about it on a number line, draw your number line out. I guess I should be a little bit more particular with where the numbers are. But we'll try it like this. So 4.25, so this is 0.25 right here. And then we want to subtract 3.5. So here's 1, 2, 3. Here's 0.25. We need to subtract another one. If we take a quarter away from a whole, we are left with 0.75. Same answer. So try these next 3 on your own and then check back with me to see if you got the right answer. Okay, so with the first one, we said if you're adding a negative plus a negative, it's going to equal a negative. And so you just add those numbers together and make sure it has the negative. So you should have got negative 14.80 or 14.8. The number 2, you see the absolute value, 4 3/5 is a bigger number than 3 2/5, so it's going to be a positive. And it's kind of like just subtracting. That plus sign doesn't really exist. It's just subtracting is how you can think of it. But otherwise, you're taking that much away from the positive number because it's a negative. So you should get 1 1/5. The number 3, the bigger number, is the negative. So it's going to be a negative. And it is kind of like, because this is a negative, this was plus, but the negative almost cancels it out because there's the negative in it and you're just subtracting. You're finding the difference. Even though you're adding, you're really finding the difference because this is a negative and that means that it's going forward, which is going to be subtracting it to get closer to 0 because this is a positive. So you should have got negative 4.10 or negative 4.1. Okay, so subtracting rational numbers. It is really like adding its opposite. So find 6 2/3 minus a negative 3 1/3. So adding the opposite would mean that you would be looking like this. 6, oh, wrong thing. 6 2/3. Adding the opposite would be 3 plus 3 1/3. And once again, I always think of when you have a subtraction sign right next to a negative, they get attracted together and it just turns into a positive. So our answer would be, this would be 2 plus 1 is 3 over 3. Ooh, that's a whole number. So 6 plus 3 is 9, plus the whole number would equal 10. So find 4 minus 0.68 minus a negative 5.79. So once again, right, whenever I see these, I think of adding a positive. And this one is now negative. So we're adding the opposite to this number because of the subtracting a negative. So we're going to have a positive 5.79. And then we're really subtracting 4.68 because it's a negative. The bigger number now is going to be the 5.79. So it should equal a positive. So when we subtract these, we get a positive 1.11. So try these next 2 on your own and check back to see if you got the right answer. Sorry, there were actually 3. So let's see here. For the first one, you should have got negative 1 3/5. It really is that these 2 numbers here, when you add those together, turn into a positive. And the bigger number's a negative. 3 2/5 is bigger, so that's a positive, or that means that the answer is going to be a negative. And then number 2, those 2 numbers go together. It's just like adding them together. Your answer is 12.62. And this last one, if you have a negative, subtract a positive, it's just like adding the 2 negatives together. So 13.45 but they're going to equal a negative. 7, 5, 2. So you're going to equal a negative 25.70. If you think about it, the negative 13 on the number line, here's 0, and then you're subtracting 12 more from it. So it's going to go in this direction because it's subtracting. So now if we apply this to temperature, if it was 3.5 degrees Celsius at noon and negative 2.7 degrees Celsius at 6 o'clock, what's the difference? So you absolutely could do a number line, or you can think that we're going to write it like 3.5 subtract a negative 2.7. So the absolute value is going to be, well, we just want to know the difference. So it's not talking about, so we're just looking at the absolute value of this first one is 3.5, and we're going to add it to the absolute value of negative 2.7, which is 2.7. So same thing, how I talked about, when you have a negative and a negative, they go together and they equal the positive. So that's just another way to look at it. 7 plus 5 is 2. Carry 1. 4, 5, 6. So it is 6.2 degree difference. What is the temperature difference between negative 2.5 and negative 6? So now we have two negatives. If we think about our number line, here's 0, negative 1, negative 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we're going to start at negative 2.5, and we want to go to 6. So here 3.5 is 1, 4.5 is 2, 5.5 is 3, and then we have a half, 3.5. So the difference is 3.5 degrees. It's not a negative or a positive when you think about temperature. It's just the difference is 3.5 degrees. If you did want to subtract this, negative 6, subtract 2.5, $3.5. Same answer. Okay, so now checking what we've learned. On a number line, the blank of the difference of two rational numbers is the distance between them on a number line. That is the absolute value. The sum of two negative numbers will always be negative. Number 3, 68.97 is a rational number. What is its opposite? Negative 68.97. So your homework today is page 34 and 35, number 5 through 23 odd. Complete this on a separate note. Please do have your parents check your work in the back to be sure you are understanding the concept. Happy homework!